the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove right here on all of our channels, and a special edition Hot Stove MLB Winter Meetings is in full effect. Nothing's really big happening as of yet. A lot of news and rumors that we're going crazy, refreshing X or Twitter, wherever the hell you want to call it. But we are going to bring it tonight, guys. We're going to give you all the latest. David Stern spoke. We had Carlos Mendoza speak. And we're going to get into it all. Hayden's going to join us as soon as he possibly can. We know he's got finals, so I know he's in the book studying. But let's get started right away, guys, with saying what up to everybody. Chris, how you doing? What's up?
Happy to be here. We got the MLB Winter Meetings finally started up. I'm excited for this. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of talk. And it seems like every single beat reporter for each respective team thinks that every free agent is going to their team that they cover. So we got that little nugget to get in there. So yeah, no, I'm excited. I appreciate it. Before we get into it, like I said, CP New York Sports, you know, to find me, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Just past 200 subscribers. I'm appreciative of everyone checking out my channel. And let's have a good stream.
Absolutely, absolutely. So make sure you subscribe to Chris's channel, and Amish Country Met fan Nelson is in the house as well. Nelson, how you doing, buddy?
What up? What up? We're good. I'm on the road to 300 subs, trying to get there before the new year at like 288, 287, something like that. So I'd appreciate it if the viewers can help me out. Those of you that aren't subbed yet, looking forward to talking some rumors, even though it doesn't sound like anything's going anywhere anytime soon. Winter meetings are being held hostage by a few free agents that I'm sure we'll get to, but yeah, good to be here with you guys. Appreciate it, and let's have some fun.
Absolutely. So, all right, guys. So David Stearns did speak to the media today in Nashville at the Winter Meetings. He had a lot to say, and it really puts it in perspective on what the Mets are probably going to do in this Winter Meetings and a little after the Winter Meetings. So we're going to start with what he said in regards to the outfield. That is very interesting, because he did say one thing that was very interesting. He's looking to add an outfielder who will receive significant playing time. There was a couple of names that popped up. Sorry, my phone's going like crazy. There's a couple of people that were brought up. Was the Korean outfielder Jung-Ho Lee. You got other guys that they're talking about as well. We can think about Kevin Kiermaier, Manuel Margot, which will be a trade. That's very interesting as well. There's a couple of other guys out there. Obviously, it is very interesting to see that he actually said that, and it's pretty obvious they're going to go after an outfielder. And I find it hard to believe that they're not going to bring in two outfielders, one to start left field and one to put on the bench. So, Chris, I'm going to start with you. So, knowing that Stearns basically said we're going to get an outfielder, and I'm assuming it's going to be a starting outfielder, Jung-Ho Lee is probably an option that I would go after. But for all the options that you heard, what do you think the Mets are going to do? And what do you think, in your opinion, what do you think they're going to do?
So it really matters about what type of bat that this quote-unquote outfielder that they're going to target possesses, right? A guy like Jung-Hoo Lee is not going to be a DH for you at this level, and we all know that the Mets still need a DH. But on the flip side, a guy like Teoscar Hernandez has the capability of being an outfielder, left fielder, everyday starter, or a DH. So I think that's very important, and I think that's something that we should definitely be sort of cognizant of when we're talking about outfielders that the Mets are potentially targeting. Jorge Soler is a bat that I would be okay with as well for the DH spot, but he's not really a defensive outfielder whatsoever. And then obviously we heard the reports earlier today about Michael A. Taylor, a guy who hit 20 plus home runs last season. Doesn't usually do that, but he also hit 220. So above average glove, definitely more of a fourth outfielder type, and would provide immediate competition against DJ Stewart. We know DJ Stewart raked the ball at the latter half of the 2023 season, got retained this offseason, and definitely has to prove himself again to make the major league roster. Listen, the Mets could carry 5 outfielders if they really wanted to going into opening day. That is definitely an option for them. And it really is a matter of who is going to be the starting left fielder at this point. And I think Young-Hoo Lee is definitely a guy that you need to target because that gives you flexibility in the trade market right then and there with a guy like Jeff McNeil. Now, I know some of the Mets fan base doesn't want to move Jeff McNeil. They are very, very big Jeff McNeil fans, but Young-Hoo Lee and Jeff McNeil are one and the same hitter. High average, low power. You look at Young-Hoo Lee's stats in the KBO the last 7 seasons, absolutely phenomenal. I'm talking about OPSs north of 850, even 900 consistently. I'm talking about batting averages north of 340 consistently. This guy's an absolute phenom, and he will give you maybe, I want to say, around the range of 10 to 12 home runs in a season. Is not going to hit 15, 20 plus for you, which is what I think the Mets still need if they go after Young-Hoo Lee, but it's definitely a viable option if you want to replace McNeil and sort of move McNeil in a starting pitching trade or even a bullpen trade, which we know the Mets desperately need. And David Stearns also said, I'm sure we'll get into the pitching, that they're looking to add, quote unquote, at least one more starting pitcher. Now, whether that be free agency or trade, we don't know. But a guy like Young-Hoo Lee, who's going to be on the cheaper side of the market in terms of foreign ball players coming over, maybe a 4 to 5 year deal worth $50 or $60 million, low AAV. It's something that you definitely can take a flyer on because Jeff McNeil had a down 2023. Now, I'm not saying that Jeff McNeil and Young-Hoo Lee cannot work on the same team if Young-Hoo Lee is brought over, but we know that clogging up two batting positions in the lineup with high average hitters or contact hitters might be a little bit counterproductive. And there's only 9 spots in the lineup. So that's just something to be cognizant of. Like I said, if you bring in Michael A. Taylor, I dropped a video on my channel about Michael A. Taylor today, and he would be direct competition for that 4th outfielder spot. Now, what's really interesting about the Mets outfield rotation right now and their core is that we don't know what we're going to get out of Starling Marte whatsoever. So that's the reason why the Mets need to shore up this outfield spot. And I can even see them getting 2 outfielders in this offseason because Starling Marte is an absolute question mark. So that's something that we definitely have to keep track of.
Yeah, absolutely. And listening to David Stearns, he didn't sound very confident in Starling Marte, even though it wasn't directly linked, the way he said it. They didn't really directly ask him about Marte, but it seemed like he didn't feel very confident about Marte being a starter or even, being ready for the season and getting going the way he was in 2022, or at least half of what he was in 2022. So it's going to be very interesting. I do think the Mets are going to get 2 outfielders. And, somebody brought it up earlier in the other stream that I did earlier today that, you usually got 4 bench pieces because of all the pitching that is on the 26 man. And, with the DH now, you don't need, double switches and pinch hitting for pitchers. You don't need 5 or 6 guys on the bench anymore. So it is going to be interesting. Are the Mets really going to have, a starting outfielder and going to have another outfield bench piece as a 4th, 5th outfielder like DJ Stewart, or they're going to run with DJ Stewart in a starting role in right field? And that's why you see the Mets going after a bench piece as, a 4th outfielder, because they have a pretty good idea of what's the issue with Marte. And, we're stuck with Marte, let's be honest. So, Nelson, I'm going to ask you the same question that I just asked Chris. With the rumors that are coming about right now, do you think the Mets are more likely to add 2 outfielders, one to start, one to be a bench piece? Or do you think they're going to go after just the one and just make him the significant left fielder or right fielder going into 2024?
I think it just truly depends on who they end up able to sign. I think if you're able to sign Lee, then you might be more willing to just add one outfielder, given that he's going to start probably. I mean, you could start him in theory. You could make him your center fielder and move Nimmo over to the left. I'm not convinced Nimmo is our center fielder for much longer, anyways. So, not saying he's not going to be on the team. I just think he's going to get moved to a corner outfield spot. He's serviceable out there, but he's not a center fielder, guys. So I could see Hooley maybe moving him over. If you can't sign Hooley and you end up with a Taylor, maybe you get two lesser outfielders. Maybe you trade for an outfielder. Who knows? I'm fine with Stewart making the team. I'm not a big fan of him getting much playing time. I like him as a power threat off the bench, but he's really, he was a flash in the pan. He had basically one good month. I'm not a big fan of his starting in any capacity. Like he plays a day or a week or two, then that's fine. But I would like it if they added a starting outfielder for sure, especially with not knowing what they're going to get out of Marte. Marte is obviously, if he's healthy and he can produce like he did in 2022, then great, we're in good shape. But if he's still having growing issues or what have you, then basically we're already down an outfielder and we haven't even got started yet. So UK Met fan, Taylor is the one who started for the Nats for a while. But we'll see. I don't mind Taylor. Taylor's he's a good glove. He's fast. He's a serviceable fourth outfielder. He's not a starter. It'll be interesting. I know Chris. I'm the first one to say like I'm fine giving up McNeil if we get the right pieces. Signing a Hooley would make him more expendable, because then, it sounds like Stearns wants to play these kids in the infield. Like he definitely he's basically said, he could be blowing smoke. Obviously, GMs don't give up their plans to the media, but he basically said their plan is to go internally at third base. That's pretty much Mauricio or Beatty. If Beatty does get the third base job and you want to play Mauricio, then it basically has to be second base, because they already said he wasn't going to play the outfield. So if we sign a starting outfielder, McNeil's an odd man out. Like, where's he going to play? Unless Marte is hurt, and I guess you keep him around to cover for that, maybe. But I think McNeil does become very expendable we have not only those guys, but we have Acuna waiting in the wings. We have Williams waiting in the wings. If we play these kids at some point next year, then somebody has to go. If it's not McNeil, it's somebody, because not enough positions for all these guys. So we'll see what happens. I'd be ecstatic to get Hooley. I love what he brings to the table. That on base percentage, his contact skills. He only strikes out, I think, less than 6% of the time. Like, it's ridiculous. And he's a 5-time Gold Glover. So sign me up for that.
Yeah, and Nelson, it's a good point when it comes to about Nimmo, because Carlos Mendoza was interviewed by the SNY crew earlier, and they even talked about Nimmo looked like he was starting to hit for more power last year. He did, obviously, and they even asked him the question, would you move Nimmo out of the leadoff spot? If he's going to provide more power and keep that average to where it is, is Nimmo now going to be a Marte in the number 2 spot? And maybe Jung-Ho Lee would be that perfect number leadoff hitter with that 340 career average. That's an interesting thing as well to look at. And, and again, I worry about McNeil. I know a lot of people like him. I know he's done good things, but he has, one really good year, and then he has a year like this, and then you start to worry about him because, it's all in his head, right? It looked like last year he was just fed. Every time he hits the ball, he thinks he should get a hit. Which is good to do, but it's like, at some point, it's like, all right, buddy, relax. you hit the ball at the end of the bat. It's a ground ball. Relax. So I see it as this. I think Jung Ho Lee is a perfect addition only because of the fact that in the second half of last year, the Mets did everything they can to keep Nimmo healthy, and they put him in left field a lot because they don't believe that he could stay healthy consistently if they don't move him out of center field. Because I think Nimmo is not going to be a center fielder in 2 years. So, and I don't believe he's a great center fielder. I know he's been better, but people look at him like he's very good, but he was extremely bad reading balls a couple of years ago. And that's why he looks as good as he does now, because of the fact he was so bad a couple of years ago. And I do think the Mets portray him as a corner outfielder. And I think that's why Jung Ho Lee is a guy that you're going to see the Mets go hard after, because not only do the Mets in outfield, I don't think they trust Nimmo to stay healthy for 160 plus games in center field. So I think that's the main reason why I think you're going to see two outfielders, a starter and a bench guy. And I like Michael A. Taylor a lot as the bench guy because he can play all three outfield positions. You need that defensive replacement late in games. If there's an injury, I have no problem with Michael Taylor starting 10 to 15 to 20 games if need be. And he has a little pop in his bat. He had 21 home runs last year. People don't realize that he had 21 home runs, and his average was 220. He's not a very good contact the ball guy, but he has some power. So he could spill a guy if somebody's injured. Yeah, Chris, I'm sorry.
A point on that with the bat to ball skills and the being a gap hitter for Young Hoo Lee. Obviously, Amish said, low strikeout guy, and you just said that as well. Two important notes. Teoscar Hernandez, in terms of the strikeout rate, he's around 31.5%, and Michael A. Taylor, respectively, is around 33.5 in 2023. So those guys, like you said, you're going to get that average dip. Teoscar is going to give you about 240, 250, maybe 260 in a good year. I don't see Michael A. Taylor hitting 250 again, to be honest with you, especially if he keeps that power stroke. Like I just can't see it. So that is something to be said for that. And the second point is that when you talk about the center field position in terms of Brandon Nimmo staying healthy versus not, Young Hoo Lee also, it's important to note that he did have ankle surgery and he is coming off of a season where he got hurt, lost about half of his season on that ankle. So that's something to monitor as well. I believe he will be ready for opening day, but I mean, as a person who suffers a lot of ankle injuries himself, like countless of times, I know how nagging those can be. So that is something to monitor as well, just in terms of that injury for Young Hoo Lee.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's something to worry about. And I think they were talking about contract with Ho Lee as well. It's probably going to be about a little less than $100 million. I was seeing like 5 years, 85, 5 for 90 or something like that, 6 for 90. So, and he's 25 as well. So, you would think he would recover pretty quickly since he's young. But you have to think about that, like you said, Chris. So, all right, guys. So we talked about the outfield. That's one of the priorities that David Stearns talked about. The next one he talked about was in-house for third base. So all the, in my case, the Chapman, the Bregman situation, the trade situation at third base, maybe, looking outside the organization for a third baseman because the trust factor for Mauricio, Beatty, Vientos is probably, I guess, high for Mauricio, and Beatty and Vientos is kind of like, What David Stearns says is that he believes he has it in-house. So that means, I think everybody, Beatty and Mauricio, competition. Now, in my opinion, I think the huge problem last year was competition wasn't a factor at all. And they just gave it to who they believed should get the job, no matter if they were good at that moment or out of spring training or not. I was at spring training. Brett Beatty raked in spring training. He deserved the third base job going out of spring training, and he didn't get it. I don't know if that factored into his morale or his confidence or whatever. But going into spring training, it needs to be an open competition between Mauricio and Beatty. And if you want to throw Vientos there, fine. Whoever comes out who has the best spring training, defensively as well. Let's not forget that. Not just offensively. I can care less if you hit 50 home runs in spring training and you can't catch a ball or throw the ball to bases. I think that would be a problem as well. But defensively and offensively, whoever has the best spring training needs to be the third baseman. Nelson, I'm going to start with you with this. Do you agree that it should be in-house? Even if you don't, you think it's going to happen. Do you disagree with that? And what guys do you believe should be at their base going into 2024?
I mean, I obviously would have preferred that they look into an option outside of the organization. Particularly, I like Bregman. If we could trade for him, there's a couple other guys, but Bregman was one of the main ones that I was like intrigued by. Never wanted any part of Chapman. It cost way more than he's worth, and the draft pick compensation. Like, screw that, get out of here. But I always had a feeling that they would go in house at third. Now, question is, who do you choose to go there? Beatty struggled mightily at the plate and defensively. Mauricio looked better at the plate. He hasn't played as much third. He's playing third in the winter meetings again. In the winter league again. Sorry. I don't know. I'm not going to say this is totally my line of thinking, because I was in a space earlier on X with Keith from Shea and Sons, and he brought it up. Ronnie looked good at second base last year.
Yeah.
And him and Lindor looked comfortable playing together. I agree with him in that I don't necessarily love the idea of breaking that up. Like, if Ronnie has a comfort level there, why make it harder for him to succeed?
Correct.
If he is comfortable there. Like, I just, that bothers me a little bit. Not to mention, somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, it's no secret that McNeil and Lindor don't have the greatest connection. Getting him the car aside, whatever. Like, they just don't seem to vibe with each other that much. There seems to be miscommunication issues at times up the middle with those two. And I mean, McNeil's attitude in general, like you mentioned it, Rob, like the temper tantrums and the whining over what he does at the plate, like it gets old to watch. So that's another reason I wouldn't mind moving off of McNeil. It opens up second for Mauricio. Then you're basically saying Beatty's your guy, because Vientos is not a third baseman. I'm sorry, he can't field. So I mean, you're kind of relying on Beatty then stepping up, because last year he looked bad. And the thing is, you can't, as much as everybody else, Steve Cohen's Mr. Moneybags and he's not the Will Ponds. Yes, that's true, but we can't go and get an all-star for every position. So we're gonna give guys a shot. So it may end up being, I know nobody loves it and I don't love it either. It may end up being Beatty's gonna be our third baseman, or maybe Beatty and Mauricio split time. I don't know what the plan is. But yeah, to me, the one offensive spot that I was looking to upgrade was DH. I still hope that happens. An outfielder would be great. Obviously Stern said we're going after one, so that's fine. Sign me up for that. And then obviously we're gonna get more pitching. Like, that's not a question to me. Like, that's gonna happen. So yeah, would I have liked to go with an outside option? Sure. Is it totally out of the realm of possibility? No, because like I said before, GMs are not going to give up, GMs, presidents, whatever, are not going to give up their plans full bore just at an interview, the start of the winter meetings. And plans change. Plans are made to be broken. Like, you can, maybe somebody calls you up and offers you a trade that you weren't expecting. And you get a third baseman, or you trade somebody that makes you have a need at third base. You never know. So it's still early. Things happen. We'll see.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Nelson. And the thing with Mauricio at third base is that in the minors, when the most errors he had was at third base, and he looked comfortable at third base, but he still made simple mistakes that worry me in the hot corner. And I like him at second base. I think him and Lindor looked good when he played at second base. And that's why I don't think McNeil is going to get traded. I wouldn't mind it. It depends on what you get back. We're not giving McNeil away for free, as Nelson brought up on the last show. But if worst case scenario, if the Mets don't get an outfielder for whatever reason, Lee wanted to go somewhere else. The other options aren't very sexy, so they don't want to go out and get, a Kiermaier or something like that. And they put McNeil in left field, which I think would be fine. You put McNeil in left field, you put Mauricio at second, and Beatty's going to get third base, like Nelson said. You can play the kids all you want, but are you confident going into 2024 that that's going to be a team that is going to, quote unquote, contend or compete? That's worrisome, because if Beatty fails, Joey Wendell's playing third base. Like, let's be honest. That's the option right now. And that's what I worry about. That's why an outside option is not always the worst thing. You can play the kids all you want, but are you trying to win, or are you just trying to play games and see what sticks when you throw shit against the wall? Because that's the biggest problem that I think we're going to run into if that scenario happens. Because I don't believe Beatty is right now a major leaguer. We've seen it last year. He struggled in the first half. They sent him down, and he started to rake again. So is he a quadruple A player who can rake against triple A guys who are never going to make the major leagues, or is he a guy that's just hasn't put it all together yet? So, Chris, I'm going to ask you, are you okay with the in-house third base, Mauricio, Beatty, Wendell? Or do you think the McNeil situation is causing a problem at third base because Mauricio is better at second base? What do you think?
I don't think the McNeil situation is causing the problem. I think the problem solely lies on Brett Beatty, because the Mets could go a bunch of different ways about this. If they're adamant, and that's what David Stearns is saying, right? They're adamant about that being in-house. One, I'll address the issue up front is that they cannot just not play Beatty. That's not on the table. It's not an option. You're not going to just not play Beatty because he had a down 2023. As much as everyone would love that option, and, if we're talking about winning ball games, if you're going to find out whether he has it or not, he needs another shot, right? He needs another shot. So that's the first issue. The second, I guess, sort of merry-go-round that you can sort of play here, is if McNeil stays here, right? I would definitely like to see, and I think Brett Beatty, whether you like it or not, I think Brett Beatty is going to be the starting third baseman for the New York Mets on opening day. I just think that's going to happen. I'd like to see Ronnie Mauricio be that guy, but I think it's going to be Beatty all the way. So given that, I would love to, and I agree with you two gentlemen on here, I would love to see Ronnie Mauricio at second base. I agree and get that his frame is maybe a little bit too big to be a middle infielder, but he looked great when he was there at the short time, flipping double plays Lindor. He looked great. His arm obviously is better suited probably for third base. He has a rocket of an arm. We saw that in 2023 as well. So you'd have Beatty, Mauricio in the infield at their respective positions, and then McNeil presumably going to be the left fielder in 2024 if he sticks around. Or what you could do is you could try Mauricio at third base consistently, move Brett Beatty as an experiment over to left field, because those are the only two positions he's going to play on the diamond, is left field or third base for Brett Beatty. And he's really the one that's clogging this position up. Like he's clogging it up. Let's be real here, because we don't know what we have in him. Fans aren't confident. We don't know if the team's confident or not in him. And we don't know if he's going to ever make it in New York under the bright lights. He's maybe a little bit more suited for a smaller market team where the pressure isn't as great, because some of his comments obviously alluded to that fact last season. Or the third thing you can do is you roll out Brett Beatty at third base, Ronnie Mauricio at second base. You trade McNeil and you add Young-Hoo Lee at the left field spot, and you still need a DH. So I think no matter what, we're going to see those two young studs like in the infield, but like I just don't know, man. I just don't know. Another option is we don't have a surefire second baseman on the market. So there's really no stopgap options unless you believe in a guy like Whit Merrifield to get the job done for a year while you go ahead and fill left field. Like, I don't know if I want to go that route. We have to wait to see what we have in Luis Angel Acuna. We can't just rush him up because that's going to be our second baseman of the future, presumably, right? So I have no idea. This is really tough. This is why Stearns gets paid the big bucks, but he has 3 options on the table. Are they 3 options that this fan base is going to like? Absolutely not. But I think that the fact that what I started this little tidbit here saying is that the Mets they are forced to play Brett Baty in 2024 is that's the deciding factor there. You can sell low on him in a trade. I'm sure someone will take him. Are you really going to do that after one season and go watch him go rake somewhere else if you're the New York Mets? I don't think that they're in line to do that. So, like I said, Young-Hoo Lee solves a lot of problems there. You're not going to sign presumably a stopgap second baseman because there's not really anybody that I'd be interested in the market to do that. And you also don't have a ready second baseman prospect to come up because calling Luis Angel Acuna up at the beginning of the season is just rushing him. And we all know he struggled last season when he came over. We all know what he's capable of, but he's just simply not ready yet. So, like I said, I'm not like, and to MEZ's point here in the comments, like I'm not one to willingly advocate for a Jeff McNeil trade. Like all I'm saying is that if they're interested enough in Young-Hoo Lee, there's no sense in keeping Jeff McNeil around. If they rather not spend the money on Young-Hoo Lee and allocate that money elsewhere, obviously Jeff McNeil is going to be here. It really is that simple. So before everybody starts popping off saying, oh, we all want Jeff McNeil out of here, I'm saying he's serviceable and he definitely has the potential to stay on this team. But if the reports are true, and that's why we're here on this podcast to talk about these reports that we've seen, and the Mets are really after Young-Hoo Lee, a younger Jeff McNeil 2.0, basically, we can just call him that. I hate to boil it down to that, but we can pretty much say that at this point. Then that really is probably the most realistic option. Listen, the Mets with the prospect hugging that this fan base likes to sort of spew and be a part of, you have to, if you're not going to give up your prospects in a trade, you got to give up MLB talent already, like a Jeff McNeil. Like there has to be some sort of give. Like you're not going to just get players for free like the Braves seemingly do. Like that's just not going to happen for the Mets. Like, you know what I mean? They're not going to dig into like the number 50th prospect in the system and get a valuable player in return. That's just not feasible. So I really think that fans have to start thinking a little bit more realistically when we talk about trades here, and the trade packages that we have to give up. Does it suck if McNeil comes back to 2022 form and wins a batting title elsewhere after we gave up on him? Yeah, that's going to suck. But at the end of the day, what is he? 30 years old, 31, 32. Like he's also not in the prime of his career anymore, or he's exiting it. So that's all something to think about. That's what I challenge this fan base to at least think about when we're having these discussions up here and you're listening to us talk about it. At least have an open mind the other way. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, and I agree. It is a give and take. And you're right, Chris. Baty puts a wrench in all of this because of the fact it's a logjam at the moment. Because McNeil is obviously the second baseman, but if they're gonna go with Baty and they're not sure about Baty, now Mauricio is up in the air now, right? And you don't want to put one of those guys on the bench because you saw it does not work out. You got to play him, and that's the issue that I think we're gonna fall into, and that's why we're not advocating to trade Jeff McNeil. But if they really think about the in-house options with Baty and Mauricio, Jeff McNeil is a trade option. And I'm not saying trade him for a bag of balls and a McDonald's sandwich. We're trading him for something significant. If there's a pretty good bullpen arm that could really help this team in 2024 and going forward, maybe it's a controllable arm that could be the bridge to Diaz. Great. I would trade Jeff McNeil for that, because if you're going to go get Young-Hoo Lee, then that replaces the Jeff McNeil experience or situation average-wise. And the difference with Lee compared to McNeil is that he has not had a season like Jeff McNeil has. When Jeff McNeil is bad, there's nothing else he's good at enough to say, okay, we got to keep Jeff McNeil because it is, right? He's good defensively in a lot of places, but Young-Hoo Lee is as well. And, you also have Wendell, who is a defensive guy in the infield. Well, Jeff McNeil can't be that infield guy that you can worry about defensively. But with Jeff McNeil in general, the problem with Jeff McNeil is the fact that if he doesn't hit 300 plus, what else does he do well enough to say, let's keep him on the team? That's the problem that I have with Jeff McNeil. And he's causing a problem in this situation now because you have Beatty and Mauricio who play similar positions. And I think that's the biggest problem. Yeah, Chris.
One thing that I will say is that I didn't mention in my spiel is that they do have the chance to keep Jeff McNeil, say Starling Marte is not ready, or say they already view Starling Marte as a lost asset where they're just planning to ride him out the last 2 years of his contract because there's no way that someone's going to take him. If he can't play, if Starling Marte plays defense the way he played in 2023, I would be more comfortable if you're going to keep Jeff McNeil and you're not willing to part ways with him. You play Jeff McNeil either in left or right field, presumably left field, and you can still sign a guy like Young-Hoo Lee with his defensive flexibility to go take over right field. And you can either, I'm not saying at that point, you still need a DH maybe, or they're just going to wash the DH position, take a flyer on Vientos, and maybe platoon Vientos and Marte. That doesn't give you your power. I know you're still lacking in the power aspect, but you still can play Jeff McNeil because I think Jeff McNeil plays he's an infielder playing outfielder. Like we see that in his game, but he does have a strong arm. If you toss him in left field, I would take a flyer on that if you're hell bent on keeping Jeff McNeil. But it really does also depend on Starling Marte. So like I said, I'm sorry, one of my options is the fourth option where you keep Jeff McNeil and you don't start Starling Marte in the outfield and you keep him as a bench bat because that is still feasible at this point. Like I said, if they're not confident in Starling Marte, you can certainly start McNeil in the outfield every day. Like I said, a lot of options that the Mets fan base is not going to like. But just like you said, if you keep those in-house options, if you keep those two young guys in the infield and they both have to start and play, then another thing that we haven't talked about, and I know that people are like against it, is like Mauricio at the DH spot. Like that changes the whole ball game too. I know I know that that's not the best option. I know that's not, but it's an option at the very minimum.
It's an option. I just don't see. I don't think the Mets want to just stick Mauricio at DH. I mean, I could be wrong. It really all depends on what caliber outfielder we get. If we bring in a starting outfielder, to me, it makes it all the more likely Jeff McNeil is dealt. Because the bottom line is Mauricio and Beatty have to play if they're here, unless one of them gets traded, which I guess is also a possibility. But I like you said, Beatty at this point, his value is not very high. Mauricio's might be higher, but I don't think anybody here really wants to trade Mauricio at this point. So if you bring in a starting caliber outfielder, assuming Marte's going to play, and he might not, like you said, you end up with a Lee and McNeil both in the outfield. There you go, problem solved. But if it's not the case, if Marte's healthy and he's playing, then McNeil is an odd man out. He just is. You can't bench. I can't see a scenario where you bench these kids. You got, as much as, like you said, we hate it, Beatty and Mauricio have to be given a shot at this point. And I think it's Beatty, the guy that nobody really wants, let's face it. Mauricio, I think everybody's fine with having a spot. But if you have Beatty on a team, you got to use him. Because if not, what are we doing? Like, it's just, you're wasting an opportunity that maybe he plays, boosts his trade value, or maybe he finally lives up to his potential and you actually have a major league third baseman. That's not out of the realm of possibilities. Guys have figured it out later in their careers. He's still young. He hasn't even, I think he's barely played a full season in major league games. If you count all his playing time. So yeah, no, it feels like he's been around for a while, but he's young, man. He still needs to be given a shot. So whether that's here or they give up on him early, I guess. But yeah, I think none of us really want to trade McNeil necessarily. I mean, I know not to be his biggest fan, but I'm not saying give him away. I'm just saying if there is a logjam, he seems to be the odd man out, and he has value. You can get a player for him or two. So it just depends on where all this goes, man. There's a lot. It's just Stearns has to do his job and he has to cook. And sadly, we're stuck waiting for Ohtani and Yamamoto and the Soto trade to see where we're actually going to end up going.
Yeah, and I think we all basically said it a little bit. Marte is probably key here. If he's not going to be starting, well, that solves the logjam right away, right? McNeil can go to right, Mauricio to second, Beatty to third. Again, I don't have full confidence in all of that because, I mean, you're counting a hell of a lot on Mauricio and Beatty to be what you need them to be. Because, you know, are we going to score 4 runs a game per game? 3.5 runs per game? You know, yeah, Mauricio, again, we hit more home runs this year than we did in 2022. And that really didn't work out so well for the Mets offensively because it wasn't enough people getting on base. And if it was only home runs and nothing else, then, you know, you're not really doing much here. And power is important, but power is also important when you get guys on base. How many more solo home runs do you need to hit? And, you know, again, if Marte's starting, then I truly believe that somebody is going to be the odd man out. Nobody's sitting on the bench. McNeil's not sitting on the bench. Beatty's not sitting on the bench. Mauricio's not sitting on the bench. And to go, Nelson, about the DH situation with Mauricio, I think that's a bad idea. Yes, he can hit. We all know that. But he's too valuable an asset where I think he's valuable on the field as well for the most part, that you can't just put him to DH because, I mean, you can't have a top prospect just being a DH. Like, how does that make sense? They glorified this guy for years, and now you're going to make him the DH? Now, if that's going to be a spot where they're going to use Vientos and Stewart as the DH, okay. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to go get a Hernandez or a Soler or something like that. But, man, I tell you, if they put Mauricio at DH, you're wasting a big asset right there. And I think he's a guy that thrives off of being an everyday player. And you can't bench any of these guys because I don't think anybody's going to thrive in a bench role. Beatty couldn't. Mauricio's never sat on a bench in his life. And McNeil, you know, yeah, could he be a bench player? But you just paid him. So you're not going to just sit. You're not going to give him 4 years and whatever he's getting paid and sit him on the bench and, you know, play him every now and then and DH him. He's too valuable of a hitter if he's hitting the way he's supposed to as average. So if anybody else got anything to say about that, but yeah, I think the major issue is here, the logjam, the question mark with Marte, the uncertainty with Mauricio and Beatty being a part of this lineup every day is an issue because I just don't know. I think it's too much of a question mark for everybody.
That's a good point. What use this name just mentioned in the chat. What happens when Jet Williams comes up? What happens when Luis Angel comes up? You're not going to be prioritizing Ronnie Mauricio in the field over those guys. No. I wouldn't think, right? So you're going to have, I mean, he's going to be a DH at some point on this team if they don't trade him, because those guys, if you don't trade them, they're going to come up and take those respective positions at second base and third base. So it's going to happen eventually.
We're all assuming all these guys are going to come up and get earned jobs and be good. Like,
that's what I'm saying. So we're actively explaining why you don't prospect hug. I think that's the main idea here, right? This is why you don't prospect.
Years, Chris.
we're trying to explain this without saying it, but I'm just going to say it blatantly now.
But honestly, that's the problem. There's not enough spots for all these guys. That's why when I heard Stearns say, "Oh," and he even said it, we're not trading for a 1-year rental. So he's okay trading prospects for guys who have years left on their contract. So that can mean a lot of players too. So he's not, consistently saying, I'm not trading any prospects for nobody. He's saying if a guy has control, we'll go get him. But that's the thing. We have nowhere to play these guys. Like, we signed Nimmo, we signed Lindor, we signed McNeil, and who knows about Alonso, but we really don't have a first baseman. So, that's out of the question. If we had a top prospect first baseman, maybe Alonso might be a question. But here's the problem. You have so many middle infielders where I said this for years. You're going to have to use some of them as assets in a trade because you're hurting your team. Because either if Mauricio is the guy that we believe he is and he got, say, third base, great. What are you doing with Beatty? What are you doing with Acuna? What are you doing with Jet Williams? Yes, they could play the outfield, but what about Gilbert? What about Clifford? Like, we keep on adding on to these guys. Like, it's great to have these guys in our farm system. You got to use them as assets if you're trying to win.
I think what's happening here, I could be wrong. I think Stearns wants to take the year and evaluate Beatty and Mauricio firsthand and see if they're legitimate pieces. If they're not, then you have to consider moving things around. If they are, then maybe one of those other kids becomes expendable. So I truly think that's what's kind of happening here. I think he's gonna take the year, or at least the first half of the year, to evaluate where these guys are at, how good they are. If Beatty proves he's legit, I know nobody really believes in him, but if he does, then you have your third baseman. Check. Then it's up to Mauricio. Do you got what it takes to play second? If you do, then you have a second baseman. Check. Then Acuna and Williams, well, one of you is probably going to have to learn the outfield, maybe both of you. If not, you got to go somewhere for something, because we also have, like you said, Gilbert and Clifford and what have you. So
Ramirez, yep.
Yeah. So I think that's what we're doing here. We're evaluating and then going from there. But
Well, at that same point, like if you do wait and evaluate and they stink it up, let's just say Beatty and Mauricio both stink it up in 2024, then you already have those replacements without getting any trade value out of Beatty and Mauricio as well for that star player who have you, right? I mean, Arena's on the market right now to be traded. He also has 3 years of control left, so you can trade for him next year as well. So like, this is why we don't get paid the big bucks. I mean, yet. This is why Stearns get paid what he gets paid, and like I said, it's a whole merry-go-round of issues that people don't really take into consideration, like the whole picture of it. And this is why David Stearns' job is so hard. Everyone's talking about Dave Stearns is sleeping this, David Stearns is sleeping that. He can't just make rash decisions, and this takes time, and this takes communication, and this takes a collective agreement in the front office. Obviously, at the end of the day, we presume that David Stearns has the ultimate say over who gets traded and who gets signed, but there still has to be a sense of camaraderie and unity in the front office about what they're doing for the Mets' future. So, absolutely, I agree with that.
Well, the biggest problem is we got guys in their prime that were wasting their years in Lindor, in Nimmo, and Alonso, right? If we're going to wait until 2025, 2026, how do we know these guys are going to be what they are now? Maybe Lindor's tailing off a little bit. Maybe Nimmo is getting up there in age and is an outfield. McNeil's up there in age. Now, the core that you have that you're trying to work around here and you're trying to win with, what's the point? Like, you might as well, and that's why the deadline is going to be very interesting, depending on where the Mets are. If the Mets are looking good and they're in a playoff spot or around the playoff spot, the deadline is going to be important, especially with all the prospects that we have. And, expendable guys like Parada, Vientos, Beatty and Mauricio, one of them are going to be expendable guys. I guarantee you that. Are they going to, if McNeil's having a good year and the Mets are in a playoff spot or close to it, you can't trade them because you got to win, right? And the Mets are in a spot right now where I think David Stearns, like you said, Chris, are going to evaluate them during spring training. A lot of these guys you're going to see in spring, Acuna, Gilbert, all these guys, you're going to see them, all. Jet Williams, all of them. And, whoever wins the job, great. But spring training is going to be a sign of where these guys are going to show Stearns what they got. Because if you're in a playoff spot or just close to his playoff spot at the deadline, and you need, say, a starting pitcher, you need another bat or a big bullpen piece, you can't prospect hug because you want to hold on to your farm system. Because they're all not going to be able to play here. There's not enough room. So, all these top prospects, where you can have one of them on the bench, isn't that the problem that we had last year? It's going to be very interesting what Stearns is thinking here, because if the Mets are in a position where they shock people a lot more in the first half and they become a team where are really going for it in the playoffs because they're playing well in the first half, you can't half-ass a trade deadline again, because you're going to end up like in 2022 where you fall off at the end and it ends up being a complete and utter disaster. So Nelson, I think Chris is there. Okay. I think that's what Stearns is probably going to do. We're gonna get a little bit more into what David Stearns also talked about signing at least one pitcher. Again, who that is yet to be known, obviously. Preferably more. That was his exact words. So we know they're all after Yamamoto, right? We all know that. So Yamamoto and Montgomery is probably 1 and 1A. Can they get both? That would be great. That would really help the rotation a lot. So Nelson, I'm going to get to you before we finish up this stream. If it ain't Yamamoto, who do you think it's going to be, or do you think they're really going to go hard after Yamamoto and a plus arm like Escobar and Monty?
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty obvious Yamamoto's their first main target. Like everybody says, like we're in it. It's the other problem is there's a bunch of other teams in it, and he may not choose us for whatever the reason. He said something when talking about Severino and signing him. He said that there is some value to someone having played in New York before. What starting pitchers out there that's played in New York before? Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah.
And we've been heavily linked to him as well. So I can see a world where I don't think we're getting Yamamoto and Montgomery. That seems like a stretch. But I could see a world where we pivot from Yamamoto and go the Montgomery route, and then maybe bring in a Rodriguez or an Imanaga, somebody of that ilk. I know he said one pitcher, preferably more. I really think they're going after two more starters. I think it really depends on Yamamoto. I think if we get Yamamoto, we may see them go for a lesser starter, lower in the rotation. But if we end up with a Montgomery, maybe we'll get a Montgomery and an Imanaga or something of that along those lines. I don't know. And there's a trade market, obviously. Like, I know we keep saying that we're not necessarily looking to trade our prospects, but if the right deal comes along, if a starting pitcher is available, you never know. So I don't know. I think I just wish Yamamoto wasn't taking so long to sign, because he's really putting a kink in all this, because we can't do anything else really, it seems, without knowing what he's going to do. We can do minor moves, obviously, but the bigger moves, it seems to be held up by what's this guy doing. So I don't know. I hope he figures it out sooner than later. I hope all these guys, I hope Shohei figures it out sooner than later, because I think that's jamming up things too. Not necessarily on our end, but then what other teams do and what the trade market looks like and all that. Like, it's just want guys, I just want these guys to sign so that we can have some activity. This winter meetings, I mean, I know it's only the first or second day, however you want to look at it, but there's nothing going on other than that Kelnick trade, which was whatever. There's just nothing happening.
Yeah, and you made a good point. Yamamoto is making it very tough for the Mets right now, because they can't wait for Yamamoto decision and have Monty or Escobar get off the board. Because if they do that, I mean, maybe Yamamoto and Joe Wolf, his agent, is waiting for that to happen. So the Mets are extremely desperate and give $300 million to him, right? I mean, who cares about the money? But that's where the problem lies with the Mets right now. I think they need to be aggressive. I think they need to sign either Montgomery or Rodriguez, not just as an emergency backup plan and to make sure you protect yourself if Yamamoto doesn't come here, but you can't wait, because if you do and they come off the board, you're in trouble, because you need Yamamoto to be any relevancy next year if you don't get Monty or Escobar. And Chris, with your final thoughts on this and to finish it up, I mean, that's the biggest problem right now, Yamamoto, and waiting for him.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, but the Mets aren't the only team that are facing that issue. It's the whole league that's pretty much in on Yamamoto. They're facing the same issue, right? So, I would like to preface this by saying that John Heyman said Eduardo Rodriguez is actually at the MLB Winter Meetings talking to a lot of teams. And then Martino said that the Mets weren't one of them, that the Mets aren't showing any interest in Eduardo Rodriguez at face value right now. So they weren't one of those teams that he's meeting with. So that's a lot of conflicting reports that we just saw
That's the
about a
exact
week
opposite
ago.
of what Michael Mayer said this weekend that the Mets.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Funny how that works. Baseball journalism 101. Let's just throw something out there and hope it sticks. But like I said, I agree with you, Rob. Like maybe you do take a flyer and just sort of take one of those higher end. Like with Jordan Montgomery, I get that everyone wants him. He's going to want 6 to 7 years. He's a 30-year-old guy. He's played in Europe before. I understand that. Are we really confident that he's going to be the number 2 starter behind Senga for the next 7 years? Like, I am not confident in that. I'm sorry. Like, when I think about Jordan Montgomery, I'll sign him for 4, maybe 5. 6 or 7 is no deal for me, right? So that's why I'd prefer a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez, because you can sign him to 4, maybe 5 years max, and he's going to be okay with that. I think 4 is the safer side there. You talk about Shota Imanaga. His market, we know what he's going to get is going to be a lot less than Yamamoto. So maybe you can target him first and then pivot, because I really do think you can sign Imanaga and Yamamoto. So maybe you just go after Imanaga first and foremost during these winter meetings, and then hold off and wait until Yamamoto. And if Yamamoto at that point goes somewhere else, then I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what happens then. Like that I generally don't know. But I really do think it's just a high risk to sort of think that Luis Severino is going to be a sure thing, because like Luis Severino has the upside to be a 3 starter if he's not injured and if he's playing. If he's not injured, let's just say that. Carlos Mendoza thinks that all of his injury history is past him. We saw that in the presser today. He has the upside to be a 3 starter. We know that. But that's not a safe bet that I'm willing to take on a 1-year deal for Luis Severino. So I think that they definitely have to come away with 2 pitchers here. The market for both Ohtani and Yamamoto, like Nelson was just saying, is holding up everything. So like I said, I would go after Erod or Imanaga first and foremost, because I think a combination of Erod and Imanaga with Yamamoto is feasible, but maybe Jordan Montgomery on a 6 or 7 year deal is not as feasible to go and pair with Jordan Montgomery. So some other pitchers out there as well are definitely on the lower side, your 4th and 5th starters. We've talked about them all before. Maybe you can pivot to like a Seth Lugo on a short-term deal too. But like I said, like first and foremost, I think we know that Senga, they are comfortable with Senga being the ace, but Yamamoto would definitely challenge that. And like you said with your expression there, Rob, like, are we comfortable with Senga taking on that ace role in just his 2nd year in the MLB? That's something that the Mets have to figure out as well, because like I don't know. But the thing is, Jordan Montgomery is not an ace type pitcher in my book. I don't think he's an ace type pitcher. I think he's a 2-3 at best. So a lot of different things here. But like I said, target Erod or Imanaga is the way I'd approach it first and foremost during these winter meetings. We'll see if they are actually in on Erod or not with Martino's reporting, and then pivot to Yamamoto. I think you have to sign at least one of those to fill in that 3rd spot in the rotation. Imanaga, Quintana, and Severino in the back end's great. Then you're waiting for that 2 starter. So let's see what happens. But like I said, baseball journalism is going on at its finest. Everybody's saying, like, I just saw a report, and we all saw the report, and I think you went live and earlier today and talked about it. Oh, the Braves are still in on Ohtani. They're going to give him $600 million. Like, really? I mean, this is like, what are we doing here at this point? So like I said, take everything you hear with a grain of salt, and yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll continue to monitor it, and I'm sure Rob's going to do an impromptu live if the Mets do something big, and he's going to provide you the content you all need. So the starting pitching market is definitely being clogged. So that's a great point by Nelson.
Yep, and I got my coffee. I'm going to be up all night. I actually took the day off tomorrow because I have a feeling something's going to go down over the next 24 hours with the Mets. And, I wanted to ask you this before we go. If we believe the John Heyman report that the Mets weren't in any of these meetings with Erod, do you think that means that they're more confident in Yamamoto and possibly Montgomery? That they're not even talking to Erod, most likely? What do you guys think?
I have no
Can you
idea.
say that once more?
Oh yeah, I'll say it again. So basically with the Erod situation, that if you believe John Heyman, with not being the Mets not one of the teams meeting with him, does that make it seem like the Mets are more confident in Yamamoto and Montgomery? Because if you're not talking to Erod, it seems like those 2 guys are more confident in those 2 guys coming. Because why wouldn't you not speak to Erod just to get an evaluation of what he's looking for? Because that's
I know you got to go soon. So
I mean, I truly don't know. Unless they spoke to him at some point and just got a feeling he didn't want to come here or the money wasn't right or something like that. And he's not the only option on the table. Like we have other there, they can pivot to other guys. It's there's a lot of mid tier guys still available, and I consider him a kind of mid tier option. It's just I don't know. It's not if they aren't going to sign any starters and just wait on Yamamoto, then I think I saw MEZ make a solid point. I don't agree that we're worrying too much about the rotation, but I do think you can start to fill in that bullpen in the meantime because that's going to be just as important. And the bullpen does have to eat a lot of innings, so that could be another route you take. Shore up the bullpen, then figure out the rotation. I don't know, man. I just really hope this logjam at starting pitching it doesn't last much longer because I do fear that we're going to end up in a situation where we kind of strike out, even though through no real fault of our own, just the way the dominoes end up falling.
I think they're gonna secure one of those pitchers up first and foremost. I think they realize the same issue is going on. So I just hope that if that happens, that doesn't take them out of the running for Yamamoto. Because like I said, one thing that we haven't mentioned here is that I know it was a different GM at the time, but you talk about striking out. Maybe they have PTSD about employing former Scherzer and Verlander, who didn't live up to expectations, and they prioritized starting pitching before, and they didn't really adjust the bullpen in the early goings, and that maybe gives them a little bit of PTSD, and they're only going to go and come away with one starting pitcher. So, I don't know, maybe that's the thing too, where they're going to kind of prioritize that bullpen first and foremost and go that route that Nelson was saying about those mid-level starters. So, I don't know. I don't think that, like I said, if I had a preference, Rob, I think I'm just going to say this till I'm blue in the face. I would prefer Erod on a shorter term deal than giving Montgomery that mega deal that he's going to want. Because I don't think Montgomery's sample size backs something like that up. So I think you'd secure Erod or Imanaga up front, and that still gives you flexibility to give Yamamoto that mega deal that he's going to want, and he pretty much deserves at this point. So that's how I'll address that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So to finish it up, guys, it's clear that the Mets are looking at starting pitching in outfield. That seems like the main thing they're going to be looking at the winter meetings. I do think the Mets are going to sign either Jordan Montgomery and find a way to get in the mix with Erod because they can't wait for Yamamoto. If they do that, they have to feel really confident they're going to get him, even though a lot of reports saying that the Giants are favorites, the Yankees were favorites a week ago, the Dodgers. If the Dodgers get Ohtani, they're out on Yamamoto, in my opinion. So if the Dodgers don't get Yamamoto, get Ohtani, I think we're in trouble with Yamamoto. So when it comes to the winter meetings, get Monty or get Erod here. That's a safe bet. That gives you a little bit of wiggle room if you don't land Yamamoto, because if those guys go off the board and you lose down to Yamamoto, I mean, Mike Vasil, can you pitch? Let's go. Are the Mets going to make a trade? That's going to be an interesting option. So final thoughts, Nelson, with everybody, and let everybody know what to do with your channel, what you're going to be doing over the next couple of days.
Yeah, just keeping up with what's going on. Try to kind of make daily videos at this point, just to stay updated on all the goings on. But if something happens, breaking news, will probably go live at some point or what have you, depending on the time. And yeah, we'll just a lot of winter meeting stuff. Hopefully it's more entertaining than it has been, but so far it's been slow. But I don't know. My hope is that something happens in the next day or two, and we have a lot more to talk about. So, and then we'll be doing the Interstate Mets report. I don't know. Did we agree on tomorrow or not? I don't remember.
We definitely can.
I know we were talking about bringing some people on and whatnot, but we'll have an Interstate Mets report at the very least once this week and maybe twice, depending on what happens. So yeah, please check out the channel, Amish Country Mets Fan. I'm close to 300 subs at this point, so if you could give me a sub if you haven't already. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks, you guys. I got to get out of here pretty soon, so appreciate you. What's up, AP? That's the guy over there. And yeah, thank you, Rob and Chris, and we'll talk to you guys later.
All right, Chris,
Sure.
final thoughts.
Yeah, I think one thing that we forgot to mention on the actual trade front is Arozarena and Glasnow trade kills two birds with one stone. I know the Rays are notorious for winning those types of deals. I know a lot of people aren't in on Glasnow, but if the Mets can strike a deal that kills two birds with one stone, you get your starting left fielder and you get a starting pitcher, and you can go out and sign another free agent pitcher. That works just the same. So I wouldn't discount the Mets with the prospects they have, but we'll see how they work it. A lot of merry-go-round type things with the Mets right now. Like Nelson said, to echo him, I'm doing a lot of videos on my channel. I just dropped a Michael A. Taylor think piece today on my channel. Go check that out. Gave my thoughts on him. Gave my thoughts on the bullpen situation, how the Mets can address the bullpen. Gave my thoughts on the starting pitching rotation on Juan Soto. I'm dropping videos pretty much daily as well. Last week was a busy week. This week's going to be even busier. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't at CPNY Sports. I've been in the chat here as well. So like I said, keep in tune with what we're doing over here. Definitely paying attention to all the news. Like I said, maybe Rob, if you want to have, do a live stream or whatnot to break some news, I'm definitely down for that as well. I'll be monitoring very closely. So I'll definitely be dropping a lot of stuff about, the reports and rumors, as well as when we actually sign these guys. Because moves are coming. Trust me, we're going to have a lot to talk about. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't, like Nelson said. I think we might try to do an Interstate Mets report tomorrow. It's TBD, but we usually go Fridays. But I think because I'm out of town this week, we might push it up to Tuesday tomorrow. So be on the lookout on that. Maybe around 7 o'clock, somewhere around there. So I appreciate everybody. The stream was great. The chat was great. Appreciate everybody bringing their opinions and thoughts about this team. A lot of opinions to be had too, because there's a lot of ways that the Mets can go about it, and there's no one size fits all. And I think that's what a lot of people as Mets fans have to realize when engaging with other Mets fans. Like, just because someone has a different idea than you, it's okay, right? Because the front office, really, we don't know what their direction is going to be either. So I appreciate it, and like I said, great stream. Catch you on the next one.
Absolutely. So make sure you subscribe to Chris's channel. Get him well over 200. Let's get him to that 300 mark as well. So with that said, guys, another Mets Hot Stove in the books. Another winter meeting special right here. And again, I'm going to be up most of the night. So if anything breaks, I will go live. Be ready to go. So if you're up, Mets make a move, even if small or big, I will be here live to give you every news that you need to do. So, and Chris, if you're up, I'll message you and you can come on.
I'll be up, man. I'll be up. Trust me.
All right, guys. So make sure you subscribe, like, and all that fun stuff. I'll see you soon, guys. As always, Met fans, let's go Mets. Let's see if the Mets make a move very soon in the winter meetings. Have a great night, guys. Let's go Mets. Good night, Chris.
Let's go Mets.
Blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell, give 'em a hand, and let 'em know you're rooting in the stand. Come on and meet the Mets, step right up and